So thank you everybody for coming back. So again, greetings from myself, from Swiss AI Association. So how it's going to go, I'm going to quickly present a model that we're trying to build in a Swiss AI Association on how to certify AI solutions. And then I'm going to invite the panelists up to join me and discuss the importance of probably certification and other topics they were talking about. And of course, your questions will be welcome as well. So first, okay, so what we're trying to build, what we're trying to build is a model to look at AI solutions and say, okay, are these AI solutions okay or not? To be very simple, yeah. Are they correct or not? Are they biased or not? Are they ethical or not? And there are a couple of forces that point into the direction that we need some kind of AI certification. And the first one is legislation. I think Pavol has been speaking about AI Act. That's maybe the most relevant for EU, for European Union. I know Switzerland is preparing something on our side, on their side, whatever. There is a big push for AI regulation in the US. Canada is also very, very advanced. China is even more advanced, but maybe in another direction. And of course, there are some, of course, India as being one of the largest AI hubs is also doing really amazing stuff. And the idea is, of course, to look at the regulation and say, okay, because regulators, if you read AI Act, I read through it, maybe one of the few people, it's really boring, first of all. And secondly, it doesn't say much, but it's very long. So, it's getting bigger and bigger every day. So, but I can give you an example from US. So US is talking a lot about ethical AI. I remember I was maybe a few months ago at one big Swiss university where they hosted a legal expert on AI. And the case was, as I'm coming from financial industry, so I'm going to give you this example. So let's say you want to take a credit with a bank, right? And all the banks have risks models that tell you, okay, so can you get a credit to buy a house or you can't? And suddenly there is an agency in US, of course, for everything. And this agency found out that the model gives out the results in such a way that white people get more credits than black people, or put it otherwise, black people get rejected more than white people. And the agency said, oh, it's a problem of a model. And we're going to talk about it, I guess, later in the panel as well. So it's a problem of a model. So we need to adopt a model that black people will get the same amount of credits as white people. And that's the solution for them, right? And they're saying, so the model is not ethical enough because it's biased towards white people, right? So this is one of the challenges that I guess every AI solution is going to have when we talk about ethical AI. But today we're not going to talk about so much about ethical AI, but more about trustworthiness and so on. We're going to talk about responsible AI. So what is responsible AI and what are the key challenges when we talk about responsible AI? So firstly, regulation is going to push all of us to somehow prove that our solutions are responsible. And of course, the customers on the other side, they want some kind of proof that what they're getting for their money for an AI solution is somehow checked. There's somebody proved it, and not maybe only on a technical level as we've seen before, but also on a process level and so on. So, is it unbiased? Is it human-centered? Is it secure? Is it reproducible? Is it monitorable? Can we explain its results and so on? So these are the challenges that certification will try to probably address, right? And yeah, how can certification really support the adoption of responsible AI solutions? So the idea behind this is that we use a maturity model. So some of you probably know this CMMI. So this means that how mature is the solution that we're putting on the market? Because there is no like 1, it's mature, 0, it's not mature. It goes through steps. So we're trying to use the common model for assessment of basically anything to assess AI solution. So we agreed on using one of the maturity models, and in this case, so like the first level is, it's incomplete, then it's initial, and then it's like optimizing, meaning like every day we're improving the model, right? And what are we actually looking at when we're talking about, okay, we're trying to look into a solution, we're trying to certify it. So we're looking, of course, at the data. We talked a lot about that today. We're talking about the model. We're talking about the process that's being used. And of course, there is a big part in governance. And that's usually the things, especially about the governance, that the companies are not looking at. So this means, okay, how is our structure? How is our entry control into a company? Do some people come to the company that can look at the customer data and they're not authorized to do so, and so on? Are we GDPR compliant? Things like that. So it's quite a complex process. And as you can see, you can monitor or look into basically everything. But of course, every solution is not going to get checked in all of these points. That's why we have a maturity model and say, okay, so maybe if we're on the level 3, that should be good enough for some customers. And let me give you some examples, not to be too theoretical. So what can we check? Like system operations. There is a very important concept of human in the loop, right? Is there a human in the end taking the result of an AI and saying, yeah, it makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, or we're going to use a solution and not? And is there a process in a company, or is in a process with this solution that we say, okay, there is somebody checking it. Can you prove it? Is the person trained to do it correctly, and so on? So this is what's being checked. Okay, data quality we talked, data relevance we talked about. So is the model explainable? Is there a possibility of a recourse? This means, can the customer say, well, that's not correct? Do we have a process to catch that problem, right? And of course, do we have an organizational governance, right? I talked about it. Do we have a data that's being checked? Do we have the right organizations? Do we have internal controls? Do we have internal audits? Do we have external audits every now and then, and so on, right? And then, of course, there is, let's say, okay, customer protection. So is it transparent how we use the data of the customers that they give it to us? We talked about, okay, we can use a large transformer model, but still we need some labeled local data to use in a model. So do we have a process to handle it securely and with enough privacy? So then, yeah, is there a bias in training? Do we have the right testing processes and so on? Is there a data drift? We talked about it before, and so on. So I will give you an example how a typical question in such a scenario of certification could look like. Yeah. So let's say you get a questionnaire, company, and you say, okay, what safeguards does your AI system have to handle edge cases in an extreme scenario, right? And then you have points, yeah? There are protective and precautionary measures, you get 4 points. There is ongoing research being conducted to ensure that the latest tools are being applied, you know. So the AI system has been tested against adversarial attacks and so on. So for every one of these, you get 4 points. And in the end, the points are summarized and say, okay, you're maybe on the level 2 or 3 or 4 of this CMMI of the maturity model assessment I was talking before, right? Or if you don't have any safeguards, of course, you get 0 points and probably you will not get far with the system, with the certification. So how the big picture, there is a questionnaire of similar questions that you just saw. There is a scoring, and then the application would get a certification level issued, either silver, gold, platinum, and so on. It should also be tailored to like smaller applications, bigger applications, and so on. So the next step, we're planning a so-called certification hackathon, where we basically want the input of the community on exactly such questions that I presented, right? So what do you think is also relevant to be in such an assessment? Yeah. So here, I'm sure that companies like yours that you presented know it, right? And the idea is not to let the regulators set it, you know, we should set it, the community should set it. So if you have more questions, please check it out on the internet page, write me an email, connect with us in any case. That's it. And now I would invite other panelists to the chairs here, to the hot chairs. Let me just get my questions together. Maybe just before we start, any questions about the certification itself or the process? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to ask who would do the scaling and who would give the answers to this questionnaire? The company itself, the managers, you will do it, or some other independent?
Yes. So we took some best practices from other types of certifications, like what IT certification, like CISA or PCI DSS in financial industry or ESG are doing. And the basis is, of course, you're provided a questionnaire and you provide the answers and with some level of detail or description of the process. This gets checked, again, depending on the level. And of course, the highest level should also get an audit on site, yeah. But this is really like the top level of the certification.
Yeah, because there will be definitely a question how to ensure that you scale different products.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, there's like, you know, a check and an audit and, you know.
Okay.
Sir.
Thanks for the presentation, Mark.
Yeah. Welcome.
Okay, so we have a lot of different rules in different domains, right? So we have one set of rules on how to certify a medical imaging problem, another set of rules how to certify something for automotive, third set of rules how to certify something for aviation, and so on. So is there any kind of harmonization effort?
Yes. So what I'd like to emphasize is this is not going deep into the specifics of a vertical. This is looking at the process. So how do you use data? How do you use model? Do you use the correct testing? Do you have the processes checked? Do you have the security behind? Is your management team okay? You know, general things, but connected especially to the AI solution, right?
But those other things have it too, right? So, for example, in aviation, you have the process of who can enter the building. You have all the same things.
If you have sensitive customer data, then of course you should have a process who can enter the building, right? If not, then not. Then that's not relevant. Yeah.
It's just that there are sets of rules that do similar things, but they're different, they're not harmonized. They're different sets of rules. So there is one set of rules that's who can enter building that I need to satisfy to aviation authorities, to, for example, EASA, and another set of rules that basically enforce the same kind of thing, enforce the same kind of quality, but I need to satisfy to get your mark, and third set of rules to maybe for somebody else. So is there any efforts to have one, or maybe say some harmonization that maybe aviation industry can use the same set of rules as automotive industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in aviation, but I know, like, for instance, if you look at pharmaceutical industry and if you look at financial industry, right? They also have their own sets of rules, right? But if you check an IT system from IT perspective of a medical and a financial company, it would be similar set of rules. You are not going detailed into like financial rules or medical rules, right? These are not the case, right? You should just say, okay, we comply with medical rules. We comply with the with FINMA requirements. We comply with that, and that would be it.
Okay, thanks.
We don't want to change that, right?
And maybe to comment on this, I think an interesting bit that we see with the European AI Act now is that there's an attempt to harmonize things actually, but we have a lot of not technical but regulatory debt on our backs, and so I think what we will see, unfortunately, is the opposite, that you have now all the different industries like aviation, medical, automotive. Automotive is working on an extension to ISO 26262. Healthcare, the FDA is working on extensions to what exists already. All these industries are now looking to pull in the content from the high-level European AI Act, for example, and these other proposals. And the most challenging part, I think, is standardization,
Yes.
which, well, we have to see how it actually pans out.
I mean, but let's look at what we have now. I know today there are companies who use AI solutions who want that these solutions are certified, but there is no certification process. And what do? Well, they take one of the big four, give them a lot of money, and they say, okay, you're certified, right? That's how it's happening now, and it's just wrong, right? They're not looking at all at what AI is doing. They're just looking at other stuff. They're looking, okay, GDPR. They're looking at physical security. Okay, this is clear.
Yeah. Or even worse, they are so the BSI, for example, which is looking at a lot of European regulations. I mean, what they are doing a lot now is taking old applications, trying to apply it to AI.
Yeah,
and a big problem there is that every applicant comes forward with their own sort of proposal, with their own materials. It's not standardized at all. And so the sad thing is that it's really hurting innovation because it slows down processes. Medical companies, really cool tech startups that are trying to bring their product to market, they don't know what to do, and it takes a long time to go through these processes right now.
Yeah, I mean, I gave you an example before. What the US regulator says, you should change the model that it will judge all people equally. So, I mean, the problem is the data, not the model, obviously. So,
by the way, do you have the answer for this problem?
well, the answer is that we like the community, AI community should say, okay, these are the things we should look at, right? And this is what should be checked in a very good AI solution, right? Maybe there's a technical part we need to check, maybe there's a data part we need to check, and so on and so on. And these are the things that you guys live, right? You work with them every day, or we work with them every day. And I think that's the solution.
So you mean that the answer to that problem, or stated by the random US agency, would be like, it's not a problem of the model if the model is like certified?
Yeah, I mean, they just want to simplify, and they talk about equality and so on the wrong place, right? I mean, if the model was trained on some data, right? And the data proved that, unfortunately, Black people don't get as many credits as white people. So, but it's not that we need to change the model. We need to change maybe the society, but that's not our issue now, right? Yeah, should we move on? Thank you all. You'll all have a chance to ask questions later on to our panelists. So I would just additionally welcome Igor Susmelj from Lightly AI to our group, and Olga Megorskaya, she's a CEO of Toloka. So we will talk about different things. But first, I would like, since Igor didn't have a presentation, maybe say a few words about your company. What do you do? What are you the best at?
Sure. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Hey, everyone. My name is Igor. I graduated also from ETH Zurich. I did focus on machine learning and computer vision. And at our company, we help actually companies in the computer vision space to figure out what data they should use. So after using tools like LatticeFlow, they figure out, oh, my model is not very good at certain in certain situations. And then the question is, how do we find more of that in the unlabeled data, or how do we find the other potential edge cases? And we focus on that in a really large scale. So for autonomous driving companies, drone companies, or some other video analytics companies.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other things from Toloka you would like to mention?
Well, just to repeat that Toloka actually initiated as the crowdsourcing platform. And I believe that now Toloka is the largest crowdsourcing platform in the world, covering more than 100 countries and people speaking all the major languages in the world. We have like almost 10 million people registered on the platform and 200,000 people earning money every month on the platform. So it's a huge source of very diverse crowd. And the whole idea behind our operations is that we turn and use this energy of minor efforts of different people from all over the world into automated pipelines, which are actually resistant to mistakes of single performers. When you have multiple loops of cross-verification, lots of mathematics under the hood, understanding which judge to rely in a certain way, etc., etc. And that's how Toloka initially was growing, from this approach of automated operations on top of the crowdsourcing. And now we are moving further towards AI solutions, what Fedor was talking about recently, to cover more of the use cases of the different clients on the platform.
Excellent, thank you. Now I want to change sides a little bit, and I will ask you about customers. So my question is, do customers ask for AI solutions, or they just want solutions? What's your experience?
They want solutions. I mean,
that's actually, we had experienced this evolution of our understanding, because since we started as a data labeling company, we had the mind for a long time that customers are coming for data labeling. And that was a very, very narrow understanding for us. Then we understood that, at first we understood that, okay, nobody actually comes for the data labeling because nobody understands why do they really need it. Then we thought that people are coming for AI solutions, which was also wrong. As you say, indeed, people are coming with just, I need something to be solved. And that's the general approach.
Igor, do you sell your solution as AI solution or a solution?
We try to call it a machine learning, or a tool for machine learning teams. We try to not use the word AI except on investor pages. But yes, I also agree. I think in the end, everybody just wants to solve a problem. And I think any company going, or any team going beyond a certain stage, they have to show real value. So at one point, just making AI or blockchain or whatever and throw it in doesn't help.
I guess, well, okay, so I guess, all right. For some reason, I don't hear myself. Yeah, so I guess I'll add to this conversation that also depends on who your customer is and what stage they're on in their development pipeline. So generally, when you start, people want to solve problems, and that some people start realizing that they want to solve problems which could be solved with AI, and then they come to ask for AI solutions.
Okay, thank you. Another connected question. So are customers concerned about black box? You're giving them black box solution, right?
I think they are concerned that even what they build is a black box for their customers. So our customers are usually ML teams that build stuff, right? And then they have this concern very often. So we try to be very transparent, and we even have part of our solution open source. We are very close to academia. We show even the methods we use. And I think you guys as well. And I think that helps a bit with making it less of a black box.
Yeah, and I think it's related to the previous question. Essentially, what is the goal of the company? And when we talk about people being scared about black box, what they're really scared about, that they will not know what to do with it in the future. They will not know how to change it. They will not know how to maintain it. So it's about these kind of questions, not about the fact that it's a black box.
How do you address them?
I mean, look, everything is a black box at the end of it. I mean, you start getting into how atoms interact with, between themselves, right? So like really the black box is about whether your customer trusts that whatever issues they might have are going to be addressed. And that's really the key, the key topic here, and everything else is of course, becoming a black box. So they are concerned when they start, and they're not concerned after you build trust and realize what kind of needs they actually have and what things they care about.
Well, I would probably add here that what we observe is that hugely depends on like the maturity of technological background of the customers, because like Toloka initially is an open platform where you can like very hands-on, so any customer can build any solutions by themselves. And when we take like very advanced ML teams of big tech, etc., they are very concerned. They are very concerned about having the total control of the process. They don't want any black box. They want to build them everything by themselves, and they just say like, give us the tools for that.
So that's a case against transformers.
More or less. Well, but then the more actually AI democratizes, the more companies are starting to use it, and the number of good ML engineers is limited. So the more we go to less mature companies, the less I think they are concerned about the black box, the more they're concerned about the faster like business results. And that brings us to the question of responsibility, etc. Because even when we provide like the black box, it's not like we should always provide some methods of proving the quality of that, some metrics, some tools for the feedback, and etc.
Okay, excellent. So this leads me directly to the next question. So sorry, go ahead. Yeah, sure. So the question was, which industries or which verticals are mostly interested in AI solutions? What do you see in your experience?
Well, let me give two answers to this. I wouldn't focus on industries rather than focus on how technical a company is. And in the majority of the industries, you can find companies who are interested in AI solutions because they don't have the expertise to build those solutions themselves. And so we, on the front of adaptive modes, we're now focusing on e-commerce, dating, and everybody else who has user-generated content. But then Toloka historically handles a huge variety of different, industries. You want banking, healthcare, self-driving, just driving.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Well, I'm actually eager to share, because when you you start machine learning in in the fields where or in teams which don't know about machine learning, that's a huge challenge always to explain to the requester management or whoever, like, is this customer, who is this needed? The way I found to approach this is you focus on the problems the person is experiencing. Like, you focus on their concerns, like, are they interested in accuracy, specific classes, biases in the data, reliability of your AI solution. And then when you start addressing these problems one by one, the trust appears much more. So it is true that there is a lot of there's quite a lot of mismanaged expectations and overhyped expectations of AI is just going to do magic for me. But like, really kind of getting the time to learn the problems helps a lot.
Okay, maybe let me lead with the, sorry.
Yeah, maybe just too quickly. I think this is also connected to the previous question. Are they looking for AI solutions or solutions? And if people come looking for AI solutions, it's much more likely that the expectations are essentially not aligned. And I think typically, I mean, there's definitely a lot of education that has been going on for the last couple of years, talking with the companies. And usually the best way how to assess it is, can you do it yourself as a human? And then if you can, then you can start thinking about how you can automate it. But if even as a human, you cannot really think of a way how you would do it yourself, then this is clearly usually not going to work.
Okay, thank you. Let me lead with maybe a continuation of what we're just saying. So the biggest buzzwords in legal AI or regulatory AI recently have been trustworthy AI, reliable AI, and ethical AI. So let me just say, we're not going to maybe touch ethics today. We do have an expert in our association who deals with ethics, but let me ask all of you, how would you in your companies define trustworthy and reliable AI? How would you, what is it?
Well, speaking about us, I would say that trustworthy is something that you can actually measure and control in a way. And to be honest, I'm really impressed and a little bit surprised by today's content and the lectures that you guys presented, because we as an open platform, we see quite a lot of trends in the industry. We have hundreds of different customers coming to the platform, building some solutions there. So we kind of observe what's going on. And what we've been observing for a long time, like we started with the big tech who are very, very deep into understanding that you cannot develop any solution without constant measuring of the results, retraining, et cetera, But then when we went to the broader market, we saw lots of really very naive cases when people oh, I just want to collect some data set, and then I don't care, like I will once train the model, and then I don't care what happens with it, and I don't care how it really works in production. And I think till the last probably year, we didn't see much attempts of like solving this problem. Nobody understood that this is a problem. And we've been telling that, like, if you ask me of what is like ethical or trustworthy, is that the fact that you actually, once you have deployed some solution, you are controlling and monitoring that it actually works in the right way. And that's, I think, a very important mind shift. And what you are doing is very important, I think, like moving the industry towards that direction.
Maybe to add here, I also think there are some really good efforts that has been taken, especially regarding trustworthiness. One I really like is also companies shared more insights on how the model has been trained. There are these model cards, I think Google or someone came up with, that give you at least some hints, what kind of data has the model seen and how should it react. And the other thing with trustworthiness or reliability is also, I often like to think, would I use it myself? Like if you ask someone that works in an autonomous driving company, you can ask this person now, would you put your baby in that, in your kid? And often they would tell you no, and this gives you actually a very interesting
game, right? skin in the game. Pretty
Yes,
simple.
exactly. You have to really think like that's the best question, right? Would you do that? And that's kind of the trust you need to have in your own solution. And then you can start expecting others to have this sort of trust. And if you're not able to do this yourself, like it's ridiculous to expect others to trust what you've built.
I think it's a very good question. I think especially for reliability, I think one of the reasons of all the AI hype was essentially we moved too fast and we skipped some steps along the way because it was just too easy to take a lot of data, throw it at the models and be impressed that this is now better than human. And now essentially the whole industry is catching up. Like what are essentially the good software engineering principles that should be in place, where exactly as Igor said, well, if I make a new release and I'm in the Tesla and I update the software, do I actually have the trust that now I'm not going to crash because I just updated the software? And this is kind of when we talk about reliability, is like both on the engineer side, but both on the user side, how can we gain this?
Yeah, I think it's really important what you mentioned, good basic computer
and this is
principles, right?
This is also what you said. It's in many ways about the process of how diligent we are about testing these systems and having the right way to do it.
Okay, so sorry.
Yeah, I probably add one thing which I think is quite important in my opinion to all the data science practitioners. And this thing is that besides the regular monitoring, it's really important to understand how deep is your evaluation, how diverse it is. And the reason is very simple. Very often we as machine learning scientists evaluate average accuracy and we're done. Bingo. Or like my loss is, lower than before. I'm happy and going home or on vacation. But the production stuff is very different. The production level is very different. What happens with trust is that your AI has a great average accuracy and then it falls on some sort of an edge case. Have you thought about that edge case beforehand? Because if you haven't, this is like an incident of loss of trust. And then 2-3 edge cases are hit and you're done. I mean, your great AI with an average accuracy is not trustworthy anymore.
So who is the guilty one if the model performs or gives a wrong answer? Who is the guilty one? You take some customer data, they give you the data, you build a model, the model gives a wrong answer. It can be just, wrong sentiment, which is okay. Or it can be, well, you have a helmet, you don't, but yeah, somebody can die. So who is guilty?
I like the previous analogy about engineering. I think if something crashes, you wouldn't go to Joseph. You were the one writing this one line of code. You probably would rather say there are multiple people involved. And I guess here as well, like it should. I think one big thing we don't do properly is also we usually build the model before we think about how to evaluate it, which is a big problem. And I think it shouldn't be one person or responsible in the end for the blame. There are multiple stakeholders involved, and I don't know how to solve this problem. I would really think about engineering there.
Well, let's say like if you have anyone who is designing the system, you already have a person who is designing the process of interacting with that system, and then it can be one person or a team of people. And then some sort of a process of building that model for that team of people. And then in my mind, I mean, the better process you have, the less mistakes you're very likely going to make. So I wouldn't say it's the person who produced data, the person who made a model or the person who deployed the model. I'd say that the process of developing AI or ML can be improved, and the person who makes that process is likely the one who needs to improve it if you have a fault.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I think this is also partly question of expectations, because ultimately the way we are using these models are to solve very hard tasks. So it's also a bit unreasonable to expect, and it's essentially impossible to expect that these models will always be correct. There will always be mistakes. It's about knowing when these mistakes can happen and having a way how to react and mitigate it. When it comes to the actual legal accountability, that's completely different question. And this is, for example, one of the ways why many of these systems can actually be blocked, because from the legal way, people just cannot decide who is actually accountable. Like if you have a self-driving car, well, who is actually accountable if something goes wrong? And for example, in Germany, I think the latest law is that if they have self-driving buses, there has to be like a operator looking at the video of the bus, and maybe the operator is looking at 10 buses at the same time, but they are kind of shifting the responsibility to this person, and I would definitely not like to be that person.
But it's a human in the loop in the end, right?
Yes, but they're just shifting the responsibility, and it's, yeah.
Okay, maybe one of the last questions from myself, and then we'll try to involve the audience as well. So if there was like AI certification we talked about before, what would be one or two features that you guys from yourself would like to see being in that certification, or what would make sense for you, maybe each one of you? What should certification check?
Well, I totally like the idea that was presented today, that what should be checked is actually the process and the principles on the system level. And that, I think, is quite a universal approach, because there's no point going deeper into the particular applications and particular domains.
I'd also say, like, who is, like, at what point is the decision made? And it doesn't have to be always human, but it has to be very well understood in what cases it is AI, in what cases it is human, and if it's fully AI, I'd be questioning it. So basically my answer is human in the loop. You know, do you have, like, at what moment in your
So
system
you would check a
operation-
process if there is a human in the loop, and at what
and
stage, and so
like
on,
what,
at what level.
like, does your process include human in the loop, at what stage, and is this a reasonable stage or not?
I think I would also look at different parts. Like, one is the final product, kind of how this works, and then there's also the development process. Like, has everything been considered or not? And I would also bring in the question that we should maybe not only focus on the model, but also the data, because it's really difficult to, you can maybe pick the model with a few inputs and see what's coming out. But in the end, we should also consider, has this data ever seen certain situations, or like, has it been included or not? Just to make sure that there's some coverability somehow.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's really about, it's a process. I mean, there was also a question before, like, the regulations, every industry, every vertical has its own specifications, and we need to kind of standardize it. And I completely agree with this, but there is a reason why this is happening, because if we would wait for the standardization, we would wait another 20 years until everybody agrees. So one things we've seen is really to start from the simple things. And the simple things can be really simple. Like, many of the things we discussed today are way advanced. And this is almost at the level, have I even looked at the data? Like, am I even regularly looking at what my system is predicting? And things like this, which almost look trivial, but this is kind of one main role for regulations for people not to get lazy and skip these kind of important steps.
Great. So now I would really invite the audience to ask questions. We have 4 very smart people here and 1 moderator, so you can really ask them whatever. Can we share the microphone maybe?
So a lot of companies, especially smaller ones, rely on open source data sets and pre-trained models as at least as starting points for their own application. And of course, that's an issue because these models and data sets are not certified. And as you've seen on one of your slides, they have intrinsic biases and errors. So my question is, can your companies contribute to perhaps correcting or certifying even open source solutions that people build off of? And is it possible that one day, just like how electronics engineer can rely on pre-certified Bluetooth modules on their PCB, perhaps ML engineers could rely on pre-certified components and not have to go through the hassle of certifying the whole system from scratch?
Certainly. I mean, this is just a question of who is going to do it. Like, as
you?
long as you can, us. I think, I mean, not necessarily us. I mean, we are definitely helping here, but I think in many ways it's a community effort. Like, we are building the technology and other people here as well, but we don't have the capacity to go and start certifying all the models. And especially, yeah, I mean, I guess you mean all the things. I mean, again, talking about the lazy things, like one of the things is actually if you download any model from Hugging Face or so on, this is actually huge security risk because you are actually allowing executing arbitrary code in your code base, which is again like almost unrelated thing, but it's like one of those easy things that should be fixed first almost.
Well, I would add that actually in Toloka, we do have a process of opening different data sets, and many of participants of our community are contributing in opening the data sets. So there is such a process on the one hand. I do believe that at some moment we will reach the stage when there is kind of enough of the data sets for the basic use cases which are needed for young startups just to start. But at the same time, I do not believe that any open general data set is a really in practice, it is a really solution for your real business. So in any way, it can be like the first step, like the first impulse, but then you always need some adjusting and fine tuning the data for your particular use case and constantly updating it to avoid the data drifts and etc. what we've been mentioning.
This is a really interesting question, and we actually had a very, very long and almost painful conversation with the EU about these pre-trained models, because not only the open source models that you have, but we speak to a lot of companies that build sort of one bigger model, and then they sort of fine tune from that for customer sites or whatever the different use cases. The state right now seems that they really think about this in terms of functional change. So when you look at these bigger models or these open source models, how does the functionality change to that final model that you're going to deploy and that needs to be certified? And if that sort of delta is minimal, then you may actually get away with the certification on these open source models or on these pre-trained models. But obviously, if you introduce changes to that, if we look at a use case in aviation where lives are at stake, then even minimal changes may require recertification. But the important thing is that that's proportional to that delta that you introduce from these open source models or from the larger model that you have towards the one that you actually deploy. So it's a very active discussion, but yeah, it's also a difficult one to have because not everyone is on the same side.
Thanks for the input. And I think that, this is the case for my company. And like, for example, ImageNet is something you will always pre-train on, and ImageNet has a bunch of issues. And you can't really afford to train something from scratch if you're a young startup. Like, it's just way too costly. So it would be really beneficial to just certify the delta. But yeah, thanks.
I have a question related to the discussion that you had about a solution versus AI solution. It seems that, so is it the correct feeling that I have, that it seems that there will be a harder regulation demands on the AI solutions compared to the usual software solutions? So again, would it first of all prohibit people of going into AI solution just because it will be harder regularized, especially in finance? I'm thinking, and overall, how do you feel about this discrepancy between this, that like if you have a rule-based solution, it can be unchecked and unethical. If you have AI solution, you're thoroughly, prepared. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Maybe let me try to answer first quickly. You're absolutely right. And to be honest, I don't like what I'm seeing coming from the regulatory part. So like the EU and US even further, they want to really cripple, I would say, the potential of the AI with regulation. And I think here it's really an important thing that the community can do and maybe fight against it, right? Otherwise, yeah, we will not be talking about AI solutions for long.
I work in a bank and I already see this shrinking, even if it doesn't make any reasonable sense. And even we also had a case where we at the beginning we build a binary classification, and there were humans in the loop that were marketing why did they make this solution. And we thought like, so cool, we will do a multi-classification. The problem is that this input didn't make any sense. So it was absolutely impossible to build any solution on it. But I think like somehow it will be maybe from my perspective, very nice to have the same demands on the like regular solutions and the AI solutions. And then, yeah, we will go to more ethical things overall rather than just one thing.
Thoughts on that?
I also have a question here, like where do we draw the line between normal solution, software solution and ML or AI solution, which is also sometimes a bit tricky. I think if you have like a deep neural network with many layers, it's maybe simple, but if you have a tree model, decision tree or something, could be
call
just
it AI.
Yeah.
It's debatable what I think about it, but they would call it AI.
I like to think about these things as just basically compare with our past. And if you think about just factories, I mean, you have machines in the factories and that's as far as you need to go to, I think, answer a lot of questions. I mean, there is certain regulations on what kind of output you can produce from a factory of close. There's certain regulation of what kind of machines can stay in your factory of close, and you replace the word machine with the word, say, model or how that thing is produced. But you don't have, I mean, do you really have a specific regulation on whether a person, a person built a jacket or a factory has built a jacket? I mean, yeah, and there is a reason for that scale, right? Or the reason for it to scale is like the factory gets regulated because they have huge scale and therefore a lot of impact on the ground world. So I'd say that as soon as you start seeing immense scale out of AI-based factories that produce something, you're going to start having more regulation on the front of AI-based solutions, if you want.
Yeah, and maybe just to quickly add, I think to me, the question is actually the same as we had before. Is it AI solution or is it a solution? Is it AI regulation or is it regulation? So in many ways, we should be talking about the regulation, not about whether we are using AI or not. And talking about the European one, which is long and not super fun to read, the way they define AI solution is actually extremely, extremely broad. So this would actually cover essentially any machine learning that you can think of. And the difference is if that machine learning is very simple, you can in a way implement the regulation much easier than if you're using very complex methods that you can, it's much harder to reason about. Yes, exactly. If you have 3 if clauses, it would still potentially fall under the regulation. It would be very easy for you to kind of reason about the system because it's 3 if clauses and you can just list them and you are done.
Then you just do not have to do this. Though, like this part of compliance, internal compliance. Yeah, but yeah, like I work in one institution. Maybe I'm skewed, but I'm seeing.
So both Pavol and Igor mentioned the engineering practices. So with industry customers, would you say that what's your assessment of like the status of engineering standards in the ML community? Would you say that it got worse because of machine learning, the engineering practices? Is this really a challenge that people forgot how to properly just build systems, or is this really a specific issue to AI?
I wouldn't say they forgot. I mean, the main challenge is that they really didn't know how to do it. Like this is a very new and evolving field, and they are kind of figuring out how to do it as we go. And because it was not a standard software, these processes just didn't exist. and then they need to kind of invent or like figure out what the process is and then start implementing it.
Yeah, can I just add to it? So I see it as well. So you have data scientists, right? They know everything about data science, and then you have computer engineers who have good computer engineering practices, and those two are different, right? So that is the issue. So now we need to teach the data scientists to use good computer engineering practices. I think that's the.
So probably a lot of the certification would be about software as well, I guess, just that they are inspired from it.
Exactly. Like if you look at the typical data science engineer, he or she might work in the Jupyter notebook, run some experiments, and then next week, what was that notebook? What is the version? Like what was the data I was running? And it's very good for experimentation, but it's not so good if you actually want to reason about what is the result and have a traceability and all these things around it.
Good evening.
Maybe I'd like to add. So your question had an interesting phrase on did it become worse, and I think it's a very, I think it's important to address this because it's like, well, we invented this new machine for the factory, did everything did producing jackets, has it become worse since then? And well, maybe, but it's a really temporary stage in I mean, you're gonna get better very, very soon, as soon as you figure out the templates for how the machines produce jackets, and you figure out, how to bound their capabilities. And maybe yes, maybe no, but it's not really important. The important thing is that in the long run, it's very likely going to be better.
Maybe one last thing to add here. In the short run, what we've seen is that the expectations for ML people is much lower in terms of engineering skills. So if some like a company has a problem and they think AI is a solution, so they get the next person that says, I can do AI, but maybe that person has not much experience in anything else outside of that field, maybe not even much experience in the AI field itself. And that's then a problem, because I think what's now happening slowly is the expectations go up as with more people are aware of how do these systems work, how should we build them, develop them, maintain them. And with these expectations going up as well, the quality will go up.
Maybe a few more questions.
So I have one question regarding the regulators: is what are actually their intentions? And
make money.
I mean, I was also at this events that you mentioned, and this was like how to not do it. I mean, this was a catastrophe. It's like, and yeah, the related, like I asked a question there was like, are you aware of the unintended consequences of what you're doing? And there, I mean, it's obvious. So maybe you can say something about that.
Yeah, so yeah, we were talking about similar examples, and really smart PhD lawyers from US were explaining how to do things which most of the public thought it was wrong, saying, okay, we need to fix the system because there is bias in our population, which is, yeah, doesn't make sense. And to the question, what do regulators want? Well, regulate. Anybody?
Somebody maybe hope that save lives, improve society.
If somebody else has another idea, David, maybe
Yeah. Well, you go first.
Look, I mean, it's also like what the regulators want, and an answer can be seen in there is a book called Strangers in Their Own Land. It's about Americans living in America, and some Americans living in America, and basically the book explores why they vote for Trump and etc. But the thing is that if you don't regulate, bad things happen, and so the regulators want to avoid bad things from happening. That's what they want, right? And then they won't just regulate and collect tax money. I mean, the purpose is to try to avoid, unintended consequences and certain things which we don't know could happen.
I actually think that regulators often get a bit of a bad rep, and I don't think it's completely deserved because they have contributed a lot to society over the last like 40, 50, 60 years. People always worry about the upcoming flight when they are in the taxi, but really it's much more dangerous to be in a taxi than to be on the plane. And that's for a reason. And so things are slow and things don't, work the way that we want them to work, but it's all there for good reasons. Now, what do regulators want? I think there are some subtle issues around that where when we went like in 2016, 17, tried to talk to people about regulating AI, we were sent home and they said, yeah, there's no way you will ever certify this thing. And now here we are like 5, 6 years later, and all we're discussing is certifying AI because there needs to be a process behind this. So clearly things are changing and we are on the way to doing that. Now, there are a lot of political pressures involved in this where you have industry governors and industry regulators that are now getting official mandates from the EU to come up with stuff and to adapt their regulatory framework from what they've done for 30 years to this new thing called AI. And it's not a voluntary thing that they're going through. I mean, they're not making any money anyway. They're not like taking on any liability or any of that. It is really more political pressure from all sides to set this up and not have everyone hate on them.
I'm sorry, I would really add because that struck me. I remember, I think it was 2018. There was the ICML conference in Stockholm. Maybe somebody of you were there. But I was surprised then, like the half of the conference and the keynotes were devoted to the ethics in AI and all those use cases about those credits and etc. And it was that time a fairly new thing because before that it wasn't such a mainstream topic. And that I remember that time, like 5 years ago, I came back from this conference saying like, oh, this is so strange. They are talking about fantastic things. How is it possible even to start regulating that? And indeed, today we already are discussing these very applicable things, and those regulation of the design of the system is something very practical and actually very applicable. So now I have a feeling that it is very likely within a couple of years to have even quite a meaningful regulation, which will not only shut down all the innovation, which is always a risk, but probably would really be for the good.
And it's a beautiful example because ICML 2018 was great, and there was a lot about ethics, but I think it also goes into the question we discussed before, which is like, how is the engineering field evolving? And back then I feel it was purely an academic thing to talk about, and what is like ethics, and all sorts of people gathered around that. But now we actually are forming an engineering practice around this, and suddenly we have lawyers, we have almost accountants, we have everyone talk about this, and it really becomes a thing, and there's a need for implementation solutions to this.
Okay, so the future is bright. This is and with this, I think we are past our time, and I would really thank my co-speakers, my panelists here, and all of you who came here, and Toloka for organizing it. So I hope we meet each other again. You have the contacts, I think, of everybody. Please exchange them, and yeah, thank you very much.